The fan base is split up right now. On one hand, you got people going crazy for Zoro, saying that this was a one-shot. On the other hand, you have the polar opposite where they're saying this was a high extreme diff fight. So I'm gonna break this fight down to the best of my abilities and give you my analysis for what I believe the true rating of this fight is, and take you step by step through every single thing that happens with my interpretation of the events. Right off the bat, I want to say that this is definitely not a one-shot. For starters, with the way that this fight ends, Lucci was not defeated with the final attack anyway. So even if that was your definition of a one-shot, one named attack lands, one named attack finishes the fight, Lucci was going to take another attack. Now, the end of this was fucking epic because Lucci essentially said, "You're gonna have to kill me. Like, I'm not conceding, I'm not backing down." He growls, he moves forward, he was able to move, he pushed past his limits to keep moving. Now, was he gonna be able to do anything? Obviously not. He's ravaged by the cuts and he collapses right after this when, you know, Jinbei uses his like brick fist. Whether or not this attack did anything to Lucci or not, or if it was just something of a smoke screen, I'll leave that to you, but it's inconsequential. Zoro was gonna put him down with the next attack. Lucci had no means of doing anything else, but that means for damn sure it's not a one-shot. Now we'll start from the beginning. So this fight starts in chapter 1091. It spans 21 chapters and concludes in chapter 1111. Of those 21 chapters though, they only appear in 5 chapters, and 8 of the chapters were full backstory, so 0 time passed in the actual story. So you take away the 8 from the 21, we drop down to 13 available chapters. 5 of the 13 is where we see them fighting. Now, we don't have to be seeing them to know that they are still doing things, but you got to understand that some of these things happen concurrently. And a prime example of how insignificant some of these time frames are is chapter 1105. We see that at the end of the chapter, Kizaru cuts the rocket, and Bonnie, Kuma, and some of the Vegapunks, among others, are falling through the sky, right? So that's what we see in 1105. In 1106, we literally see that the entire chapter, they remain falling. The end of the chapter, they have finally landed. So one whole chapter, they were just falling through the air. It's literally happening in seconds. Then going through 1107, we see that all the events that take place in the first half of the chapter were happening as they were falling. As when we come back, Sanji, Bonnie, Luffy are all in the exact same position they were at the end of the last chapter. So we got a 3-chapter span here, which takes place within seconds. That's the truth of like chapters. That's why it's so weird whenever somebody says, "Oh, this took this amount of chapters." Guys, the chapters doesn't matter. That has no bearing on the amount of time that has passed, all right? And like I said, there's things happening at the same time. So throw that out of your mind to begin with. So in 1091, all we see is that Zoro goes in, he hockeys up 2 swords, and he tackles Lucci out of the building, who's in base, and uses haki on his leg, which is pretty cool. They just spill out to the outside, and that's all we get. We skip 1092, we cut back to them in 1093. Now this is the point of hot debate. In 1093, we see that they've been huffing and puffing, so we know that they've been exerting themselves to a decent level. Zoro is flowing his haki and has the green flames. The only time we see the green flames in this entire fight, and there is small sparks of lightning. Now there's no lightning sparks when he's actually throwing attacks, but there was a lightning spark in the final panel of their fight in 1093, which leaves things very ambiguous. Now the way I interpret what was happening before the flow was that Lucci seems to be on the defensive and he seems to be moving back to me. Zoro seems to be pressing the action moving forward, where Lucci is parrying the attacks with his claws. That's the way I see it. Parrying is different from dodging, by the way, but this is a very impressive speed showing for Lucci. He's keeping up with Zoro, right? He's keeping up with Zoro's offensive and he's parrying, hanging firm, and he's the one being pressed. That's my interpretation. Now, if you want to say he's just standing in front of Zoro, whatever, it doesn't really change things too much, but I think that the obvious implication was that he was getting pressed. With that being said, what Zoro says here is very interesting. He says, if this is all you got, you have no chance of fighting Luffy. You have no chance of getting your rematch, no chance of running the fade with Luffy. You're not worthy of that. And, you know, Lucci has his own snide remark back. But the reason I take this quote so serious from Zoro, and you may want to just chalk it up to bravado, but with what he does, it seems very much so that this is a legitimate statement where he is not that impressed with Lucci's strength at this point. Now, I don't want to say this to say Lucci's weak, but I do want to say that it doesn't mean that Zoro's not going to take things serious in the fight. It just means the level of power that he's using with 3 swords, potentially flowing his haki, it's unnecessary for Lucci, right? And the reason I say that is because the next time we see them, it's 1094, When everybody reacts to Saturn, we understand that Zoro has stopped using 3 swords already. So instantly right after, people think that he didn't stop using the 3 swords till 1107 just because we didn't really know. It was kind of unspecified when he stopped using it. He stopped using the swords immediately because we see a close-up of Zoro's face and he doesn't have the sword in his mouth, the 3rd sword. So we know he stopped using it. I think that this is because of who his trainer is, Mihawk. What does Mihawk say to Zoro when they fight in Barati? I don't hunt rabbits with a cannon. And he fights him with the pocket knife. Because Zoro is not going to be a match for him with any sword, but that was the smallest one he had, so he was going to run the fade with him and try to use it for some kind of development, you know, for Zoro, give him a fair chance, and, you know, take it as somewhat of a challenge. Like, even though it still wasn't, that was the best challenge he could give. Best opportunity, right? I feel like Zoro saw the level of power Lucci was at and said, I don't need full power for this. I'm going to use 2 swords. And I'm going to try to beat him with 2 swords. I should be able to beat this guy with 2 swords. And that's where I think that the pride came in, where he's going to try to beat him. And yes, Lucci hangs tough and they actually show them clashing in 1107. This is not a parry. He just actually like blocks the sword. Zoro even says, you're really hanging tough. I want to conclude this. I want to hurry up. So people are like, well, he wants to hurry up. He must be going all out. No, we know what Zoro going all out looks like. So the dialogue really doesn't matter. We know him going all out is Ashura. That's the peak of his powers. If he really was pressed and really was going all out, he'd be using Ashura. We see this throughout One Piece whenever he uses it. He only uses it about 3 times, but that is the pinnacle of his power. That is his strongest attack. He says that to Law. He's not using 3 swords. And he's not using his King of Hell series attacks. King of Hell series attacks start off saying King of Hell 3 sword style. 3 sword style just say 3 sword style. So even his final attack later is not a King of Hell series attack. He's using the 2 swords. It looks to us that no Conquerors is being used, just Armin Haki, and he's clashing with Lucci. And Lucci's hanging tough, hanging firm, and keeping up. Now, when Lucci gets confident, Zoro kind of reinforces what I'm saying by saying, it seems like you think you're the one in control of the duration of this fight. And some people have been kind of scoffing this away like, oh, Zoro's just talking shit. I think it's really just a true statement. I think Zoro at any point can end this fight. Like, Lucci cannot react to Ashura. If he used Ashura, you know, he couldn't even react to the Hahava Hunt. If he used Ashura, which is way, way, way more potent than any of those attacks, and even his King of Hell series attacks, it's going to be stronger than them. He kills him. You know, we see the amount of damage Lucci takes from Hahava Hunt. So yes, Zoro could literally end this fight whenever he wants. So I think that it's just very clear that, yeah, he is kind of nerfed himself down. Now, the truth of it is, I think that it's more so just a plot-induced stupidity thing where, you know, for Oda, he wanted to build tension with Saturn, okay? Kizaru and Luffy were fighting, and those are like the big dogs of the arc, and those 2 go down. He makes those 2 go down, has Luffy completely incapacitated, and that's when Saturn's like gonna be on the offensive. So now all the tension's there. Luffy's out of his form. Who's gonna save Bonnie? Sanji just got taken out with the paralysis. He can't move. It's a big moment, okay? Of course, we know that that was all set up for Kuma's big heroic arrival, so Kuma could save Bonnie, etc., etc. That was the point. So if Zoro just like cut Lucci down immediately and just dropped him and moved on, there's no tension there. Zoro is more than enough to fucking deal with Saturn. Obviously, Saturn's gonna keep regenning. He's not going to be able to kill him, as far as we know. We don't know how to beat them definitively. But Saturn's physical showings, his durability, his speed, all these things have not been impressive. You know, he has the gimmick of the regen. He had that paralysis. We don't really know what the paralysis is, but he obviously couldn't use it on Luffy. Obviously couldn't use it on Kuma. It might have just been a one-off thing. We don't really know the details of it, but he's not very impressive. So Zoro being there kills the tension. Zoro would be more than enough to keep Saturn busy for the time where Luffy is down. That's the plot answer. That's the truth, in my opinion. Like, that's the real truth. But if you want the inverse example, I think that Zoro is literally just using Lucci as a form of like working out, a form of training to like, I'm gonna beat you with this, and this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use 2 swords. It's like fighting with a hand behind your back. I don't know if you guys have any experience with this kind of stuff, but if you're fighting a smaller fighter or less experienced fighter, but you want to still give them work, you just handicap yourself. I'm just going to use a jab this round, all right? You know it's coming. I'm going to use a jab, and he can go all out, whatever. I'm going to use a jab, but I'm still getting work because I'm using my jab. I'm setting up my jab with this kind of way. I'm using all these different techniques, right? You also get in a state where it's like, even in those situations, if you've ever sparred, you kind of just get encapsulated in what you're doing, where you're locked in. It's a competitive edge moment. you and your partner kind of just lose all semblance of like what's going on. Now Zoro did recognize that there was a threat on the island with Saturn. It's not going to stop him from like taking away the pride of the fight. Like the pride is he wants to put Lucci down with the 2 swords. He's not going to just be like, all right, fuck it, I'm now going to just end this. And you might call that a character flaw, but when you understand kind of like the competitive like masculine edge thing, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, you guys may interpret it different, but it's like, no, Zoro just wants to win with 2 swords, and it's like that's what he means. He wants to wrap it up and he can't do it, so Lucci is hanging tough with Zoro with 2 swords. And then he obviously hears the Sanji thing and literally just kind of does what I say, where it's like, okay, yeah, at any point he can just whip out the 3rd sword, dodges all Lucci's fucking named Shigan Gatling thing, his spotted Madara attack. He dodges it with ease, casually, grabs his sword out of the air, and then just cuts him down, blitzes the shit out of him. Showing us, right? Showing us that there's levels to the game. Showing us that really at any point this could have happened. You know, Lucci's literally on the offensive trying to attack him, and Zoro just like pays it no mind and puts him down. Now, Lucci, in credit, like this is one of the best moments in the series. Like it's honestly a great moment. I'm not even overblowing it. Like him taking the attack, being one of the most brutal panels of One Piece with the 3 massive scars. He's got the line down the middle of them too, coming up vertically. And he just growls, mans it out, fucking screams, turns back around and looks back at him like, you're gonna have to put me down. Epic scenes. And yeah, Zoro even gave him his own praise. He's like, hey, he's not done. You know, he wants to, I'm gonna let him die. Like, I'm gonna take him out with the next attack. Jinbei essentially saves Lucci's life by, you know, pulling Zoro away. The duration, and even what Nami says, like holding Zoro, she's not watching the shit. We literally see her doing her own thing with Chopper, Robin, and all these people, like in the middle of the house. She's not sitting there watching the fight. She just knows that Zoro's not back. So obviously Lucci's doing something. And she sends Jinbei over there to make sure he doesn't get lost and to make sure like he gets the fuck back so they can leave. It's not about him needing Jinbei. It's not about her fucking being like Zoro's in trouble. It's just she's stating the obvious. She's stating the obvious. He's not with them, so he's being held up by Lucci. That's what he's doing. She doesn't know the fucking truth. The way I see this is it's a mid-diff. And it could be a one-shot. If, like, Zoro wanted this to be a one-shot, he could make it a one-shot. Like, if you used Ashura, he'd one-shot him, right? With Ashura. He'd probably one-shot him with, like, Dragon Damnation or one of his stronger King of Hell series attacks. But he didn't one-shot him with Hava Hunt. And it wasn't a one-shot anyway because they were, you know, going back and forth. The way I look at a one-shot is Kaido and Luffy. Kaido just like isn't even fighting Luffy, takes a barrage of punches, stands up, and then immediately just drops the shit out of Lucci. Or like Big Mom Page 1 walks over there, puts him down. Shanks and Kid walks over there, immediately puts him down at full health. Like there's no fight that takes place. It's just boom, done, finished, right? But I do think that if like Shanks goes over to Kid with just like casual sword swings, no named attacks, and kind of just lets Kid fucking hang around, Kid can react for a while. Kid can get some moments. So it's like he just went over there with Divine Departure and put him down. Like Zoro could do the same with like Ashura, but that just wasn't the way it is. So I'd call this a mid-diff. I still think King is stronger than Lucci. He took a couple of A-Conk attacks, clashed with A-Conk. Also, my interpretation is that he reacted to the Dragon Damnation because it cut through his sword. He just wasn't strong enough to block it. So I feel like he tried blocking and it got cut in half. I haven't seen enough from Lucci to say, hey, you know, I'm gonna put him over King. I think King's performance is better. You know, he had those durability showings without even using his Dura form. He's relative in speed to Zoro's named attacks. But yeah, I'm impressed with Lucci. Let me know what you guys think. I'll catch you guys. Peace.